Welcome to the B2B Breakthrough Podcast. We're here to bring you all the best knowledge, insights, and strategies from e-commerce experts, successful business owners, and the team at Alibaba.com that you'll need to grow your business and achieve your next big breakthrough. I'm your host, Sharon Gai.
Our guest today is Jason Feifer, Editor-in-Chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. He wears many hats and is an accomplished podcast host, book author, keynote speaker, and startup advisor. Jason is dedicated to helping others become more resilient and adaptable in a world of constant change to seize new opportunities before anyone else does. Welcome, Jason.
So I'll just kick it off by maybe if you can share a bit more about your background, what you're doing today, and how you got started and all of that.
I'm Jason Feifer, Editor-in-Chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. And my job is to meet and work with and help entrepreneurs, which is a pretty amazing thing. Also a weird thing because that's not actually where I come from. I come from the media space. So my background is in working at all sorts of different magazines. And when I got to Entrepreneur Magazine, I honestly just thought of it as another magazine job. There was a lot to do. There was a big opportunity to redefine the brand entrepreneur so that it wasn't just a small business brand, quote unquote, but was really speaking to the incredibly wide variety of people who all identify with the word entrepreneur. But I will tell you something. When I started spending time with entrepreneurs and absorbing the way that they think, I started to change. I started to change the way that I understand myself and my career, but also the way in which I pursue opportunities and almost the daily actions that I take towards those opportunities. I'll give you one random example. So years ago, 2018, my wife and I wrote a romantic comedy. It was a novel that came out on a major press. It was called Mr. Nice Guy. You don't have to find it. And we started working on that before I got to Entrepreneur Magazine, which was in 2015. And so when this book comes out in 2018, I noticed two very distinct responses depending on how I knew someone. So if they were a writer friend of mine or someone in the media, they would say, "Congratulations, that's so awesome that you and your wife wrote this book and it's out." Entrepreneurs would say something differently. Entrepreneurs would say, "Oh, that's interesting. What are you going to do with it?" And for a while, I was thinking, why is this happening? What are these two different responses? And then I came to realize this. And this goes back to what I was talking about with absorbing the way that people think. Most people, myself included for most of my career, are horizontal thinkers, which is to say, do something, put it out in the world, move along. Do something, put it out in the world, move along. Entrepreneurs are vertical thinkers. It's not a natural way of thinking. Entrepreneurs think that the only reason to do something is because it is the foundation upon which the next thing will be built. Which is why whenever they heard that I had a romantic comedy out with my wife, they thought, well, what's the next move there? Are you going to start a school teaching people romantic comedy? Like, what is the thing that you're going to do with this? And the answer was we hadn't thought about anything. We just did it. And there's nothing wrong with just doing it. But what I love about entrepreneurs is the very tactical, strategic way of thinking in which you don't have to know exactly where you're going. You don't have to know the ROI on why you do something, but you better make sure that every effort is used, that you feel like you're building towards something, that you're constantly aware of momentum and learning and adjustment and growth. That is an unnatural way to think, but once you spend time with entrepreneurs, it becomes the way that you think. And that was totally transformative to me. And that kind of leads me to where I am now.
That's so interesting. Do you think that because you still have a full-time role at the same time because of the people that you're interacting with, whether it was in your full-time role or things on the side, that eventually you spun out into shifting this way of thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's my world. I have a full-time employee job at Entrepreneur Media, the parent company of Entrepreneur Magazine, where I'm the editor-in-chief. But Entrepreneur, true to its name, also is very encouraging of entrepreneurial activity. And so I have, it better be, you know, I have my own company, which is called Feifer Media, under which I do a whole bunch of different things. I have a speaking business and I produce a whole bunch of other media. I do some consulting. I do some advising. I'm starting to build a community out of a newsletter that I write. And all of these are different revenue sources. And what I find is that they all, and this is the reason I think that Entrepreneur honestly is so excited for me to do this kind of stuff, it all feeds back on itself. It all becomes this virtuous cycle where, because I am throwing myself into newsletters, for example, then I get to test a lot of stuff out in my own thing with my own ownable company. And then I bring those learnings back to Entrepreneur. And so when I'm having a conversation internally about our own newsletter strategy, I know a lot more than I otherwise would have because I'm doing it myself. And that is something that I think too many companies don't appreciate. I've heard from so many entrepreneurs whose story starts like this. I was working at a bank or whatever, and then I started this thing on the side. It was going really well. And eventually the bank found out about it. And then my manager said, you have to make a choice between staying in this job or doing this other thing. And so I quit and I did this other thing. And now I have this amazing company. I hear that story all the time. And I always think, you stupid bank, you stupid bank. You just chased out, right? Like you just chased out one of your great talent, great, ambitious, entrepreneurial talent who would have gone outside and built something for themselves and then taken all of that knowledge and lessons and new people and they would have brought it right back to you, right? They work at 150%. They would give you 100% and they would keep 50% for themselves. And if you chase those people away, you are just left with worse talent. It doesn't make any sense to me. But the world of entrepreneurship is full of that.
Why do you think so many companies walk the more traditional path when they see somebody like that who's clearly smarter or really smart and they make them choose? Is it a risk thing? Is it just it's so unconventional? It's not the norm yet?
It's a really good question. I bet it's different for everybody. I think it starts with a discomfort with new ways of working. The old model of you go to a company, all of your ideas and energy are owned by that company, you stay there as long as you can, that is programmed into the structures of many large organizations. And I think the training that takes place for the people who become the managers at those organizations. Oftentimes, what we're looking at aren't bad or short-sighted people. What we're really looking at is bad management training. And that management training comes out of an older model of how we work. I prefer to think of everybody as on a journey. And that journey is going to be twisty and windy, and we are going to be at organizations for certain amounts of time, and we're going to provide value to those organizations, and we're going to get value from those organizations. And we should all be okay with the moment when it's time to move on. I remember I kept hearing this story. Where was it? Earlier on in my career, I had a couple friends who worked at, I think it was Marie Claire. I could be wrong about that. Marie Claire, this women's magazine. And they told me that the editor-in-chief at the time would always tell young, new editors, welcome to Marie Claire. I hope that you come here, learn a lot, put a lot into it, and then get out about 2 years later. And the reason for that was because you're not supposed to be here forever. You're supposed to come and learn and be ambitious and then like go somewhere else and grow more and then maybe come back later, which would be exciting, but you aren't here forever. So think of this as an opportunity to learn, to create value, and then move along. And I gotta be honest, I like that. I like that mode of thinking. I have a team at Entrepreneur. I don't ever want them to leave. I love them. But, you know, whenever somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, I just got another job offer over there and I think that it's something that I need to pursue, I say, I knew this day would come. Like you're too good for me to hold on to you forever. And I'm really grateful for the time that we had, and best of luck with what comes next. That's natural. That's normal. And when you start to think like that, like your job is to get the best of people for however long that you can, but not have some false idea of holding on to them forever. Well, then you start to give them the freedom and the flexibility to grow, and counterintuitively, they will stay with you longer as a result.
That's great that you encourage new blood and change. So I guess that's probably why you wrote so much about it, or you wrote extensively about it, and that's the theme of your book. Can you tell us more about why you wrote the book and what the core message is?
Sure. So the book that I wrote was called Build for Tomorrow. The subtitle is An Action Plan for Embracing Change, Adapting Fast, and Future-Proofing Your Career. And that's because what I found by talking with the greatest entrepreneurs and leaders in the world who I have access to because of my role is that they've all developed a unique relationship with change. And that unique relationship enables them to grow in ways that others can't. And I became really interested in what that is. How do they understand their place in a changing world, a changing company, a changing industry? How do they seem so focused and grounded on the things that matter and less concerned about why the thing that worked yesterday is not going to work today? Ultimately, what I found is that people who are really good at being adaptable are really good at recognizing what I call the thing that does not change in times of change, where they are able to identify the thing about them, the value that they create. It's the difference, for example, from I'm a magazine editor, which is a very changeable statement. All it takes is me being fired from a magazine and then I'm not a magazine editor anymore, to I tell stories in my own voice, which is a way of understanding my value in which nobody can take anything away from me and nothing can change that would change that core value. I find that when we are really clear about the transferable value that is most core to us, we discover that all changes that happen around us are now just opportunities to do the thing that we're best at in some new way. It's always about delivering upon the thing that we're always already best at. And once you start thinking like that, sky's the limit. This is how people reinvent companies. This is how people reinvent industries. This is how people launch a company, the company doesn't work, they take the learnings from that company and they build it into another company that is successful because they're seeing it as one journey and they're focused not on the individual what and hows, but rather on the why. And I know the why has become something of a cliche in entrepreneurship, but I think it's an incredibly valuable way to think. Once you start looking at your core, your mission statement, the thing that you have to offer that separates you from everyone else.
Mm-hmm. Your unique selling point, or in the world of products and e-commerce, we call it a product's USP, and applying that to a person also. What is your competitive advantage? So what's your unique selling point? So in the book, you describe this change process in 4 phases: panic, adaptation, defining a new normal, and then point of no return. How did you come up with that? Was there a certain couple of people that inspired it, cases, examples that led you to that framework?
Yeah, it was COVID, to be honest with you. So when I was in a funny position in COVID, which was I'm in the business of opportunity. Right? I'm in the business of helping people recognize opportunities, of helping them grow opportunities. And at the beginning of COVID, it felt like no opportunities. And I didn't know how I was supposed to continue to communicate with people. I am a naturally optimistic person. The messages that I offer are optimistic. I didn't know what to say or do.
Where were you during COVID? What was day one like?
Day one was on a plane. The day that schools shut down, I live in Brooklyn, New York, with my wife and 2 kids. And New York had it pretty bad and was really the first major hotspot in America. So the day that schools shut down, me and my wife and our then 4-year-old and like crawling baby, we got on a plane and we flew to Colorado. because that's where my parents are and where my sister and her family is. And my parents had room for us and they had more space. We were very, very fortunate to be able to do that. As that was happening, I was talking to entrepreneurs and I was seeing what people were doing and thinking. And I reflected back a lot on a conversation that I had just almost days before we left on that plane. Because as you'll remember, it all accelerated so fast. And so just a few days earlier, we were out at what turned out to be the last social event that my wife and I went to before everything shut down. It was a friend's birthday. It was just dinner with maybe 10 people at a restaurant. And I was sitting next to a woman named Megan Asha. She is the founder of a company called Founder Made. It's a trade show for CPG founders. And I said to Megan, hey, Megan, how are you feeling? Because you are in the live events business and it seems like live events are getting shut down. What are you going to do? And she said, she's like, I'm weirdly feeling good about this because not good about the whole thing, but right, like, because she said, as a live events business, we have all of these ideas for ways to expand the business, for other revenue lines, for new services that we could create. But we never have time to pursue any of that because we are always consumed by putting on the next event. And if events are going to be on pause for a while, well, that gives us the opportunity to finally think through and start to build out some of these other ideas. And at that time, during that dinner, I thought, well, this is like a person without fear. Like this is just a fearless human being. And I start to see a pattern in how some people are reacting. And I start to understand what Megan was going through better. Megan is not someone without fear. Megan is someone with a more useful fear. So you can think about fear in two ways. There is the fear of losing what you had, which is a fear that most people feel, and it forces us to cling very tightly to what we had before. We don't want to let it go. We don't want to lose it. But there's another fear, and that is the fear of not finding the next thing fast enough. And that is a fear that propels you forwards. And built into that fear is a belief that there is a next thing. There is some other opportunity. The fear of losing something that you had is a real fear of limitation, that the thing that you had was good and can't be replicated, that there isn't more out there. But the fear of not finding the next thing fast enough is a fear of abundance. It's a fear that there's lots of ideas and you need to find the next one. And I find that once you recognize that these two fears exist, you can start to calibrate yourself towards them. It's important to say fear is okay. Fear is okay. Change is really scary. There's nothing that I can or should be able to say that would eliminate that fear. But the thing is that just because it's scary doesn't mean that it's bad. Or just because it's scary doesn't mean that there's not something that you can do with it. So once you start to understand the value of things that maybe don't immediately seem valuable, the more you can start to put yourself in a position to really use them. What's funny is that moments of great change, if you're willing to really deeply engage with them, can also be these moments where you recognize the opportunity that you had always overlooked. You had said my book is divided up into these 4 parts. It's panic. These are the 4 phases of change: panic, adaptation, new normal, and wouldn't go back. And I came to these by watching how the most adaptable entrepreneurs. So I'll tell you a story about a woman who I spoke to, very small business. Her name is Lena. She has a company called Lena's Wigs in Baltimore. It's a storefront, sells wigs. And during normal times, it operated just like a storefront, which is to say that people came in off the street. Lena had hired an employee to greet these people who come in off the street, and then they would browse for wigs. COVID comes. She's not able to welcome people from in off the street anymore. What is she supposed to do? Well, The only thing Lena could think of to do was something that she had been well aware of as an option, but never thought that it was a good option for her. And that was appointment-only operations. Nobody could walk in off the street. You'd have to make an appointment in order to shop. Now, why is this a bad idea? Well, according to Lena, before COVID, this is a bad idea because why would you add friction to your operations? Why would you make it harder for someone to shop with you? You should make it as easy as possible. It should be a storefront. People can walk in at any time. But now it's COVID. She has to move to appointment-only viewing. And when she does, something fascinating happens, which is that she discovers, one, her customers are happy. Two, she's driving higher profits. Why is this? Well, because here's what she didn't realize. You know who doesn't buy wigs? The answer is people who walk in off the street. They don't actually buy wigs. They browse wigs. They're curious about wigs, but they don't buy wigs. You know who does buy wigs? People who are shopping for very personal reasons, typically health or religious. Those people do not actually want to be in a shop surrounded by a bunch of randos who walk in off the street. They would much prefer a private, appointment-only experience. So here was Lena operating her business the way that she thought she had to operate it, like a storefront. She had hired a person to greet the people who come in off the street, which is now to say that she had hired a person to greet the people who are not her customer at the expense of the people who were her customer. And COVID forced her to make a change, which she discovered was actually a much better way to run her business. And that is now what she does. And she has grown substantially. She has really reimagined her business, and she has reconsidered what she used to think was impossible. So now map that out. Panic, adaptation, new normal wouldn't go back. Panic. She was panicked at first. She did not know what to do once her original business model had been disrupted. Adaptation. She did the only thing that she could think of, which was to move to appointment only. She had to do something to keep business open. New normal. She discovered that actually this was a much better way to operate her business. This was a new familiarity, a new comfort where she was able to relate to her best customers in a way that was most valuable to them. Once Lena recognized that this new way of operating was much better than the old way, she could start to reinvest in it and say, well, what else could I do? How else can I serve these people? I'm going to build up my digital presence. I'm going to build up my website. I'm going to explore digital fittings. All of this stuff is exactly where you end up, well, so long as you're willing to creatively engage with the change that's happening.
That story reminds me of how live streaming got started in China, if you've caught wind of this whole thing. So in China, COVID years were a bit tougher than the US, where people really couldn't leave for certain people in certain apartments. And so these store owners, before, they were these offline stores. And suddenly there was no foot traffic. There would be these malls that used to have beauty counter after beauty counter. And then suddenly one day, no more foot traffic. So what is this mall going to do? And then this mall started to buy those circle lights, the ones that you see the influencers use. And then every beauty counter salesperson became a live streamer. So they turned on their camera, opened up a live stream channel, then started just talking about the same product. I mean, the products samples were right in front of them. And they started talking about it and making sales online. And that model was then copied to many different types of stores, from food stores to clothing stores, try-ons. And then off that industry, it took off. Yeah. And now it's the norm. And now there is no point of return, because I think by now live streaming is about 30% of total e-commerce sales in all of China.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I find the live streaming thing fascinating because it is, I mean, live streaming as a concept and a consumer behavior is so much stronger in China than it is in America. And that's not for lack of trying. I know that there have been a number of companies that have explored live streaming here. And there's some kind of cultural difference that makes it work in China in a way that it hasn't taken quite as strongly in America, although I know that it does exist. But I think that those are really awesome things for entrepreneurs to look out for, because if you see something working in some other setting, you can start to say, well, what's the DNA here? What's the what's the consumer behavior? What's the problem that's being solved? And how can I modify or adapt that for a different marketplace? How can I take advantage of it? How can I be one step ahead of someone else?
Or, you know how the Apple Vision Pro was just recently, I think it was released last week or something. Within minutes, it was $300 million in revenue. And now there are a lot of app developers specifically foregoing the phone, not even the desktop, foregoing the phone and going directly into building something for that VR type of experience.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Which is great because the VR experience, I feel like, has thus far, it's quite a serious market, but it hasn't reached that kind of mass adoption yet. What I have found is that people don't like new things. What they like is better versions of old things. So you have to think, whenever you're introducing something new to the market, about how you can start by speaking the language of your consumer and engaging with their active known needs and problems, and then bringing them along to your solution. We often do it wrong, right? Like we often do the other thing, which is that we start with some great idea, some innovation, and we say, well, everybody was going to want this, and then you give it to people, and people don't understand it at all. Like one of my favorite examples, outside of like the technology space, is I was once talking to a guy named Jason Wright who started a snack brand called Wild Brands, and the first product was called chicken chips. And what is a chicken chip?
Is it full of protein?
That's exactly right. It is. It's full of protein. The idea was that Jason was sitting around watching football and snacking on potato chips and thinking to himself, I feel disgusting right now. I wish that there was a healthier, like protein-packed potato chip or something that was like a chip. So he goes out to a bunch of food science labs, and he finds someone who can develop exactly this chip, this crunchy chip experience, but made out of chicken chips. He packages it up. He gets Whole Foods to pick it up. And when he is at Whole Foods and he is running the samples tables at Whole Foods, people come, they try it, they like it, they buy it. When he is not at Whole Foods, not running the samples table, nobody buys this product. Can't figure out what's the problem. When he's there and he's sampling, people like it, they try it, they buy it. When he's not there, nobody. What is wrong? Well, one day, Jason decides to just go and watch people as they engage with the brand, not knowing that he's there. And what he sees is people pick it up, look at it, make a face, put it back down. Why? Because, as maybe you listening at home have been thinking this entire time, chicken chips sounds disgusting. It sounds disgusting, right? Totally, I wouldn't eat it. It sounds awful. Jason had this idea. He was excited about it. Therefore, he thought everyone else will be excited about it. But that's not how things work. It's not how things work. Instead, Jason needed to understand the needs and the framing and the language of his consumer. He needed to start with them and build a bridge from them to him, not the other way around. So he goes out and he starts talking to them, starts to understand their frameworks, their problems, what they shop for. And then he comes to a new way of describing this company, this product. Instead of it saying chicken chips on the bag, it now says, and you jumped right to it, it says protein chips, because people already consume protein bars and protein shakes. So once he started calling these things protein chips and then explaining later that the protein comes from chicken, sales unlock. Same exact product, now just skyrocketing sales. This thing is in retailers nationwide because what Jason did is he built a bridge of familiarity. He started with them and what they need and what they want, and he built a bridge from them to him. I started this because we were talking about VR. I don't think that the VR industry has done that yet. I don't think that they've really successfully identified the things that I or whatever consumer are doing on an everyday basis and saying, I have a simple, easy way for you to do that same thing better. Instead, when I put the VR goggles on, what I'm presented with are like a whole bunch of interesting experiences, but they don't naturally integrate into my life. And so I put it back on the shelf and I forget about it. I mean, there's literally right over there, there's an Oculus that I haven't put on in 6 months. I think we'll get there.
It's almost a little too removed from your immediate life, like the chicken chips. You're eating potato. You can't just right away jump to the chicken. There has to be something in the middle as almost a stepping stone that you get to, and then you take them by the hand and then you get to the next one. And I guess seldom do entrepreneurs forget about that. What practical strategies or exercises can entrepreneurs implement to fast track their adaptability?
Well, let me go back to something that I had used as an example, which I would encourage you to really think about for yourself, which was, if you remember, I said this thing, which was the difference between I'm a magazine editor and I tell stories in my own voice. I would strongly encourage, as a starting point, you doing some version of that for yourself, which is to say, first think about how you would answer the question, so what do you do? And what you're probably going to do is you're going to think about the tasks that you perform or the role that you occupy. What do I do? Oh, I'm a magazine editor. Oh, I have this job at this place. But then try to drill deeper down until you are able to write a mission statement sentence. It should be in as few words as possible, and it should start with the word I, and then every word after that should be carefully selected because it is not anchored to something that's easily changeable. That's the magic between I'm a magazine editor and I tell stories in my own voice. I'm a magazine editor, easily changeable. I tell stories in my own voice, not changeable. I do this exercise. I have this whole exercise to run people through to get to this point. It's really helpful and clarifying. We don't do this enough. What you're really ultimately doing is orienting yourself towards what part of you do you have control over, even when you feel like other parts are not in control. And if you understand what part you do have control over, then that is the place that you can always build from.
And maybe by grounding ourselves in this mission statement and then not only just saying it to ourselves, but exclamating it to the rest of the world, that is maybe a more sure footing for ourselves as entrepreneurs when change arises. So that no matter what sort of big disruption, whether it's COVID or this AI thing or whatnot, the economy, that you'll just continue be grounded in that mission statement.
Yeah, that's right. And then you understand why people come to you. It's incredibly important to understand the relationship that you have with your consumer and what your core value is, because that's the thing that you should always be building upon.
How would you define adaptability in a business context?
I was talking to this guy, his name is Hamza Mudassir, many years ago. He's a disruption expert. He's at Cambridge. And he was telling me this story, which was, he said, you know, there's an old story about what killed Kodak. And, you know, what killed Kodak? Well, everybody thinks the same answer. The thing that killed Kodak is the digital camera. That's what killed Kodak. And there's a reason for that answer. Kodak was involved in the development of the digital camera and then put it on the shelf, basically. But he said, you know, there's another way of thinking about it. The digital camera didn't kill Kodak. Facebook killed Kodak. How would that be? Well, here's how it would go. When the first digital cameras came out, they were not very good. I mean, I remember getting one. The resolution wasn't very strong. The memory was low. You couldn't take that many photos. And also, they were big, clunky. And also, what were you going to do with it? Like, what were you going to do with these digital photos? This is early internet times. There was nowhere to store them. You weren't going to share them. And then Facebook comes along. And Facebook gives us really the first major use case for storing and sharing digital photos. Now suddenly there's somewhere to put your photos and a way to share your photos, a way for other people to engage with your photos. I mean, people who are old enough remember a time where Facebook just kind of became everybody's photo album. You just uploaded all your photos to Facebook. And that helped people say, oh, this digital camera has a purpose. And that's what killed Kodak. Because here's the thing. And this is the point of the story as far as Hamza Mudassir is concerned. Hamza says, look, the problem is that Kodak understood itself to be in the camera film business, but it wasn't in the camera film business. It was in the memory business. It was in the business of helping you capture your memories. But because it thought of itself as in the camera film business, it thought of its competitors as other companies who make camera film. And it thought the way to compete against those other companies was to do the same thing faster, better, and cheaper. But that doesn't actually keep you alive forever. Because as it turns out, when the world changes, your competitor is no longer who you think that it is. Your competitor is now something that you didn't even see coming. So you better understand the core value that you have to offer, and you better be constantly testing that. Harvard Business Review ran a piece a couple of years ago. It was called, Why Do Big Companies Stop Innovating? And the answer was that big companies start with an innovation, and then they build upon that innovation. But then over time, everyone at that organization becomes incentivized not to innovate, but to be efficient, to do the same thing better, faster, and cheaper, just like Kodak. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with efficiency. But the problem is that if everybody in your organization, top to bottom, is incentivized towards efficiency, then nobody is incentivized to look around and say, you know, this thing that we're doing is becoming less relevant. Or I see a change on the horizon that's going to change everything. And if you are not thinking about that, and if you are not taking seriously what those changes look like, then you are setting yourself up to ultimately be disrupted. And a quick exercise that everyone should always be running on any change that you see coming, this comes from some friends of mine at a company called Pen Name Consulting company. They have this little exercise, which I really love, which is they ask, is this a door or is this an engine? It's a metaphor. So let's just say that you're driving down the street in Brooklyn, New York, and the door falls off your car. Can you still get where you're going? Yeah. You should fix that. It's not very safe, but you can still get going. Now, let's say you're driving down the street in Brooklyn, New York, and your engine falls off the car. Can you get where you're going? The answer is no. Car's dead. Some changes are doors. Some changes are engines. We have to understand which is which, take it very seriously, and act as fast as you can.
You've worked with so many different entrepreneurs, CEOs throughout your time and interviewing them, writing about them. Any particular one that really sticks out to you as somebody who's faced change really well?
I love meeting small business owners. I've told you some stories of them today, like Lena from Lena's Wigs. I also get to meet fascinating, very famous people. So I remember Ryan Reynolds we were talking about his transition from actor to entrepreneur and how he didn't know how to do a lot of these things. He said this thing to me, which I really loved, which was, to be good at something, you have to be willing to be bad, which I thought a lot about. And I realized, we often think when we start something new, entrepreneurs starting a new venture, that those early days will teach us whether or not this is something that we are able to do or meant to do or have the capacity to do. But that's the wrong way to think about it, because nobody is good at something at the beginning. It's not possible. And so instead, what we really are being separated by is who is willing to tolerate being bad long enough to get to good. That's what separates people out from those who are going to be successful, those who are not. Who is willing to tolerate being bad long enough to get to good? That's what Ryan was saying to me. And I'll give you one other. Malcolm Gladwell. I was interviewing Malcolm Gladwell, best-selling author, podcaster. We were talking about his work, and I had asked him about the filter that he uses for what a Malcolm Gladwell project is. And he said to me that to the best of his ability, he tries not to ever define himself, have a clear definition of what a Malcolm Gladwell project is, because he said, and these are the words, self-conceptions are powerfully limiting. So he said to me, self-conceptions are powerfully limiting. That if we have too narrow an idea of what it is that we do, then we will turn down all these other opportunities around us to pursue new and even better ideas. And those are two of many things that I've learned from other entrepreneurs that I try to internalize in my own work.
I think that speaks perfectly to staying fluid with opportunities that come and adapting to new opportunities that we've never seen before. So now looking forward into 2024, what business models, sectors are you going to keep an eye out on?
I'll tell you something that I keep hearing over and over again, which I think is worth thinking about for anybody looking to looking for opportunity, which is I've heard many people say the next big ideas are all in quote unquote boring spaces. So they're all in areas that are under innovated, that don't have a lot of hype, that aren't splashy, that maybe aren't consumer focused. What are we talking about? We're talking about food supply. We're talking about insurance. We're talking about transportation. We're talking about healthcare. These are areas that are in desperate need of innovation, in which there's, the kind of for many intents and purposes been overlooked in favor of innovation into the next hot, buzzy, mildly more convenient app. And so I'm seeing a lot of excitement there. And that's also overlaying really well with a shift that's happening in which entrepreneurs are building closer to home, or they're returning to home, or they're staying in smaller cities instead of everybody moving to the coasts, because the investor world is no longer so clustered in San Francisco and New York and Boston and so on. And so there's more opportunity now to start building in places where the consumer is, right? So if you're going to build something in ag tech, for example, agriculture technology, that doesn't make any sense to build that in San Francisco. You should go build that in Kansas. And there are these ecosystems now that are developing that are supporting those kinds of things.
What advice would you have given to your younger self, the Jason that was walking around at Clark University?
What I would say is be open to the path. The thing that you are going to find most valuable and most rewarding is going to be something that you've probably never heard of and that you didn't prepare for. So be open to how every step is really just the launching point for the next step. Here I am at Entrepreneur Magazine. I'd never heard of Entrepreneur Magazine when I graduated college and was a community newspaper reporter. But it turned out to be a transformative experience. And yet I don't want to stop. I don't want to think of Entrepreneur as now some destination point. I want to think of Entrepreneur as now a platform that helps me identify new and exciting opportunities. And as we talked about before, those things can be integrated. They all work together in concert. But let's make sure that I never find a place and say, aha, this is where I wanted to go. Now I stop.
Because going back to what we were saying in the beginning is no matter what you're currently doing, that it's healthy to embrace change.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And to see a new opportunity and just go and jump at it.
If you are exactly the same person doing exactly the same thing, thinking the exact same thoughts today as you were 10 years ago, I would call that stagnation. I bet that nobody listening to this relates to that thing that I just said. We're all evolving. We are all the products of change. It happens whether we like it or want it or not. So why not be intentional about it?
It was so great to have you with us and sharing your journey, your insights, your predictions. Where can people find you?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me. I really love working with you guys at Alibaba, so this is a joy. Two things, my newsletter, One Thing Better, onethingbetter.email. You can find that. It goes out every week. And also, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, just respond to any of the emails. It goes to my inbox. And then my book, which we talked about, I'll remind you, is called Build for Tomorrow. You can find it in hardcover, audiobook, ebook, whatever format you like.
Great. Well, thanks so much again, Jason.
Thank you.
B2B Breakthrough is brought to you by Alibaba.com.
To find out how Alibaba.com is empowering its customers with the tools, services, and resources they need to grow their businesses, visit Alibaba.com. And then make sure to search for B2B Breakthrough Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. Make sure to follow us so you don't miss future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Alibaba.com, thanks for listening.